Welcome to the Professional Fan Podcast, your home for all things fan life. This week, we're trying to answer the question, does solo projects mean that the band's breaking
Solo
up?
projects, meaning bands are breaking up. No, I did. I know that that was like a big worry when Ashton Irwin started teasing Super Bloom. Everyone was like, wait, what does this mean for 5 Seconds of Summer? Obviously, now we know it meant nothing. Like, it just gave him a creative outlet to do something different. And since then, every single member has released at least one solo album. Um, but also, there's a band that I follow closely, McFly. I don't know how well known they are in Australia/New Zealand, that part of the world. But um, all of those members, they've been a band for like 20 years or something stupid. Um, all of those members have gone off and done separate things as well. Like Danny, the guitarist, has had his own solo music. Dougie, the bassist, has his own like band called Ink on the side that he did for a few years. Like ultimately it never changed the dynamic of the band and they still are going so strong and still touring and still playing all of their music. Um, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think for me, when Ashton started announcing Super Bloom, I kind of wasn't worried because he's the sort of guy that I was like, he's always going to make music. And Five Sauce had said that they were going to have a break between albums. So I was like, okay, that's cool. I think when Luke started doing his solo projects, that's when I was kind of like, is this a thing? Um, and obviously now recently we've gotten Callum's and Michael's solo projects, and I didn't worry for those ones because I've like we've seen this before. It's not the end of the world. Um, I do know some people who the second that Michael also had his own solo project, and that meant that every person in the band had a solo project. They went Five Stars are never going to be a thing again, are they? Um, and so I think it's interesting to sort of also explore why this might be, because I know a lot of times in the past, especially in New Zealand, there have been bands that the second more than one person has a solo project, they never really get back together. Um, I think, can I name any? I know we have a local band in Wellington. I don't know how well known they are outside of Wellington, but there's a band called Bad Tab. Um, and I know Ethan, what's his stage name? I don't know. We'll just go with Ethan. Yeah, it works. I know that Ethan released a solo EP. Um, I think that was quite early on in their journey as well. Um, but that sometimes I find, well, actually, especially with every band that I listen to, it's because there's a story they're trying to tell that doesn't fit the full band. Because in Ethan's case, the EP, I remember being really deeply emotional and really personal. And that wouldn't have fit the band's story because you have to remember that I'm just gonna use Five Stars as an example, but there are four different guys there, and the story has to feel like it aligns for all of them, versus if it's a solo project, it's only your story. You don't have to like check in and see if this makes sense for everyone.
Yeah, no, I do think Luke shook the boat a little bit because obviously him being the lead vocalist, everyone was like, oh, and then he was the only one that like did a tour as well. So that was also like, ah, I personally have never believed, and I still to this day don't believe that Five Sauce will ever break up. I
Yeah.
think like they might take elongated breaks at a time, but I think ultimately into their like late adulthood, to like the age of like take that and stuff at the moment, I think Five Sauce will kind of always be Five Sauce. I don't think there will ever be this like breakup thing that happens. I think maybe they'll just go on breaks for 10 years, but they'll still be we're in 5 seconds of summer type thing. But yeah, I think Luke's was the one that like scared the fandom the most because of him being the lead vocalist and the only one going on tour. But like you said, it is about having this like personal story to tell. Like Callum's album that's literally just turned 1 year old, God bless.
Yeah.
is very personal to him and how he feels about things he's gone through and like losing a pet and growing up with the band. Yes, whilst it's about the band, it's like his perception of the band and his feelings towards the band. And I'm sure all of them have at least a song that kind of tells their side of how they feel about the band. But also Ashton in general is always very, very, very vocal. Like he did an Instagram live the other day and he said he was asked in the chat like, would you ever go on a solo tour? And he was like, when you're given the option of going on tour by yourself or going on tour with your best friends, you're always going to pick your best friends. So I think at least Ashton's in it for life. like Five Sauce could crumble around him and he'll still do it. But no, but yeah, it is a very like personal thing to do, and I think it speaks to the strength of the band as well, because I don't think you can do solo projects as frequently as Five Sauce have and not have the band fall apart. I think it shows how strong they are and how good their friendship is and how good their professional life as a band is, because there have been occasions where artists have gone on and done a solo thing and the whole band has just crumbled because they've fallen out over it.
Yeah. I think the difference between two bands, if we were going to compare Five Stars and One Direction, because they did tour together, so there's a little bit of like common ground. One Direction were obviously formed on a TV show. They were actually chasing solo careers first, and so it didn't surprise me when they did sort of start going and doing solo projects and exploring their own sounds, because it's kind of like they always wanted that. There's always a part of them that wanted that. And it was also an environment which wasn't the best for them. And so they thrive better in their solo sounds. With 5 Seconds of Summer, I think they did definitely need to explore their solo sounds so that they know what they bring to the band and so that they explored their own stories. But look at how they interact just in their own day-to-day life when they're not making music. I think, I mean, they do call each other brothers, and then they show up at each other's personal events, which we've seen glimpses of when they reference it in interviews and stuff. But even just like the other night, there was a clip from their recent tour, one of their recent dates, where during soundcheck, Michael himself said that his daughters refer to the others as uncles. It's that fact that for Five Stars, it's not just professional, it's their entire lives revolve around each other. Versus with other bands like One Direction, you didn't really see that. It was all so professional and sticking together. And at times, even in interviews, you could tell when the vibe just wasn't there, when they just had an argument in the car getting there. Um, so I think that's why Five Sauce are sort of not an exception to the rule, but they sort of seem to work around it in ways that are not often seen. Um, yeah, I think it really boils down to, is this a group of friends or is this a professional group? Because I'm also looking at bands that I've been around, my younger brother's in a band, they were best friends first, and they spend every chance they get together from year nine to this year they're graduating. And so it doesn't surprise you their onstage chemistry, because it's like they're all best friends. They've got inside jokes, and sometimes they don't even realize that the inside jokes have made it over the microphone while everyone's like, um, "Oh my goodness," they're debating whether they should switch up the set list, and they're like, "Actually, let's go here before we go there because we've got good crowd interaction." They've done that all over the microphone while everyone's listening. Um, but that's my opinion when it comes to bands, is you can tell if they are actually hanging out outside of the music or not. And you can also tell in the storytelling of their songs quite often, um, because there might be like surface level themes, or they might actually discuss deeper what it means to be in this band, what it means to be around each other. And it also these boys in Five Stars, they have grown up together, so there are a lot of shared themes that really work because they all grew up in the same neighborhood, they've had very similar experiences growing up. Then when you put a band together on TV, and I'm thinking of One Direction, but I've also just thought of Midnight Till Morning. They haven't all had the same experiences. They're all coming with very different life stories. And to try and put that together in the band, like, of course, solo projects make sense because if no one else in the room has that same experience, but you still want to tell it, of course you're going to put it on a solo project.
I mean, I have never loved the comparisons between Five Stars and One Direction, but like you said, they went on tour together, so it kind of somehow always goes back to that. But like they did have such a different entry into the world. Like you said, they were chasing solo careers. One Direction were chasing solo careers when they got put together, and they never wanted to be in the band, particularly. But it with Five Sauce, they even back on their YouTube days, they went into it kind of knowing they were going to be a band. Like, yeah, Luke and Callum did little solo covers here and there on YouTube, but even like in the music room at school, you would see that they were singing together and they were talking about getting a drummer, and like you could kind of see it all coming together as if like they knew they wanted to be in a band rather than I want to do this solo thing, you want to do that solo cover, whatever. Whereas One Direction went on to X Factor and auditioned as solo artists and got put together as complete strangers. It's very, very different. So there was inevitably going to be buttings of heads and, you know, differences of opinions and very, very, very different upbringings and backgrounds and whatever that makes the music a lot less cohesive in a way. Like, yeah, One Direction have some bangers. I love One Direction. They were like one of the first bands I ever really, really, really loved. But their music isn't like as deep or as raw or as emotional as a lot of other artists' music. Like a lot of One Direction's music, they even got picked on for it when they were together. Yeah, so they're a very bubblegum pop, cheesy band, even if you look to their latest albums. So it really isn't surprising that they didn't last that long, and it really wasn't surprising when Zayn within months was like, "Hey, solo music, cool." And if you look at all of their solo music, it's so different to any of One Direction's sounds that
Mm.
it obviously was never really going to work long term. But then going back to Five Sauce, if you look at all of Five Sauce's solo music, you can kind of hear where it all ties in to Five Sauce's sound or how, you know, each solo thing comes together to make the Five Sauce sound because you've got these more laid back, calmer songs that are obviously, if you then listen to a solo album, it's going to be Callum. Or you've got the rockier, edgier sounding songs like Michael and Ashton, and then you've got, you know, songs like If Fools Could Talk and Everyone's a Star, and then you've got these kind of more produced songs, but still with like a guitar lead, which are more Luke sounding. And it's like you can kind of hear it in every little album that they've done, every little EP, that you're like, oh, this could pass as this song, or this could be put on that album. Like, in my opinion, there's a Five Sauce song that I don't particularly love, but if it was on a Luke solo album, I would love it. Older on Five Sauce 5, I think it's fine. It's fine. Um, But I think if it was a Luke solo song, especially with the collaboration on vocals with Sierra, his wife, I just think it would be so much more romantic, in my opinion, and so much more personal to be on a solo Luke album. And I think that
Yeah.
would make me enjoy it a lot more because for me, Older feels like a little bit out of place on a Five Sauce album because it's not all of them. And you can tell it's not all of them. You can tell it's just Luke and his wife singing about this one thing that they have. And it's like maybe, yeah, you could relate it to Michael and Crystal, but it doesn't feel like it belongs on a Five Sauce album. It feels like it belongs on a Luke album. And I would really, really love it if it was on a Luke album.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I personally would love it if it was on a Luke and Sierra album. I'm holding out. I'm hoping that one day we get an EP. Well, actually, not an EP. I want more songs than that. I want a full album just called The Humans because that's where that belongs. That's where that song belongs. But what's also interesting is what you said about you can find where the solo albums of Five Star sort of how those sounds fit in. Um, Personally, I see music as colors quite often. What's really interesting to me is that both Luke and Callum have blue. They have different shades of blue, but their solo are blue. And then Ashton's red and Michael is like this neon orangey. But you can see how those two fit. What's also interesting is that when they come in as the band, you can see like those red and blues merging into a purple in the band. There are other bands I've listened to where their solo sounds have very distinct colors, but then there's one color that takes over when you listen to them as a band. And so that has always been interesting to me as well. It's like they, it feels even, especially now that we've got all of these solo projects. It feels really even because I've always been able to see those distinct colors in the band. Um, yeah. I also think, again, going back to like sort of the brotherhood behind it, I think that's also why 660, a local band, works really well. I mean, their backstory is incredible. The name 660 comes from the fact that that was actually um the number on their door. It was either at university or in a flat or something like that. Um, but you you know that 660 is always going to be 660, even if one of them steps away for a while with their family, or even if they take a break for a while, they're always going to be 660 because of that brotherhood there. I think an element of that is also like the Kiwi culture of like Varnell, because you could tell me that all of those guys are actually literally cousins, and I'd believe you. Um, but again, that's why I say that my favorite bands are the ones I listen to. I like when you can tell that they're hanging out outside of the music, because 660, their music feels like it's possibly written like that they all sit there and have a family barbecue with all of their families together, and then like the guitar comes out and there's a song written. That would not surprise me. It just sort of it feels like the music is within them, and every time all of them are in the room together, a song happens. Which is also how I feel about Five Stars. It's also how I feel about Bad Tab. Yeah,
Yeah, I do think as well it helps when they write their own stuff.
yeah,
Um, I think obviously there are additional writers everywhere, but I don't think off the top of my head, I don't know of any Five Star song that at least one of them isn't credited on as a writer. Usually a combination of them, if not all of them. But as well, that leaks into their solo stuff is they do write their own solo music as well with other writers. But I also really, really enjoyed that on every solo album they did really take solo to the extreme. That like you don't have Ashton playing drums on any of the albums, you don't have Callum playing bass on any of the albums. You don't even have them playing like their own respective instruments as far as I'm aware. Callum didn't play bass on his own album and he easily could have. So I think it's really important and really interesting to see those like relationships build and like how they outreach to other artists that obviously they know to make their solo ness come to life, because otherwise it would just end up being another Five Sauce album just in a different font essentially. But yeah, you've got as well like McFly, they they go through ebbs and flows with their albums. Like they've got a different sound for like every album basically. And you kind of go off onto their solo bits, and it's only a couple of them that have like solo music, but all members have their own solo projects respectfully, but it's just not always music. Tom does a lot of musical theatre and does a lot of like playwrights and stuff, and Harry Judd does a lot of sports, a lot of marathons, a lot of stuff. But Danny and Dougie have done solo music, and that even whilst they were touring or playing their solo music, they were always talking about McFly and kind of assuring everyone that it's not the end of the world, it's not the end of the band. We're just doing this whilst we're all taking our breaks. Like, one of them's just had a baby, so we need some time off. But it wasn't me that had the baby, and I still want to be creative, so this is how I'm going to do it. Because
Sure.
even on Little Mix, I don't, I've never listened to any of their solo stuff. Well, that's not fully true. I listened to each of their debut songs
Mm,
and just didn't really vibe with it in the same way that I do with Little Mix's sound. So I didn't then make the effort of like chasing their solo careers. I do, if I had to say anything about any of their solo careers, I will say that I think Jade, in my opinion, has the best songs, and I think she could really be in it for the longevity because I think she's got a really unique voice and a really unique stage presence and a really unique way of the first album being released being all about the toxicity of the music industry. I think that's really cool. And I think she's just been on tour maybe earlier this year or late last year. I'm not 100% sure. Again, I don't follow their solo stuff, but I know she was on tour semi recently, and I know that did pretty well. And she did, like Brits performances and stuff. So I think she really could, if she stuck to it, be one of the greats in terms of like the pop girls. But
yeah.
again, like the way the band broke up was very messy, and a certain member of that band has consistently made it a very horrible thing
Mm,
to confront and talk about, even as like a fan of the band. It's just like there's just no real point in talking about it because three of the girls don't deserve what happened to them, and one of them made it so incredibly difficult that it's kind of even now still hard to navigate, and it's been a good few years.
yeah. Yeah. And it's recently been brought up again. Um, but I have also listened to Leanne's solo music. Um, that's really interesting because I feel like with Leanne, she has this way of bringing like older sounds that we've heard before, but making it her own. And
Mhm.
I definitely think she's more alternative than like just like that pop sound. And so that really drew me in. I agree with what you're saying with Jade as well, because I think um Jade just has this unique edge that draws people in. And so she could be the next pop girl, but I think Leanne could be like the next like alt pop girl. I listened to one of Perry's solo songs, I think, maybe two. Um, didn't mind it, but didn't draw me into the whole album. But what's really interesting there as well is like you as a those three as a band, um, like on their last album that was just the three of them, you could very much hear influences of the three of them, but it was cohesive as a band. And yet when those three have done their own projects, it sounded so different.
Mhm.
I think there's a part of me that feels like there's a world where those three may collab again. I don't think it would ever be Little Mix again, but I think that they might, feature each other
I
occasionally or
know
something.
I know recently one of them was asked if they would, or maybe, I can't remember who it was, but I think one of them recently was asked if Little Mix would ever get back together as a three-piece or a four-piece, and the answer was definitely a three-piece,
Mm,
with, a hint of shade. But I do think they worked better as a three-piece because, as well, if you look back on when they were a four-piece, you can see that one of them was hard to work with. Um, Creatively, be that in the writing, be that in the production of the songs, be that in the music videos. There was always one that had more complaints, more difficulties, more errors, whatever it was, more takes at a vocal. Like there was always one that was just that little bit worse, and then not worse as in like less talented, but worse as in harder to work with.
yeah.
Um, because she is by no means not talented. I'll give her that. I don't like her songs, but you can't deny when someone has a decent enough voice. Like, it is what it is. She wouldn't have got as far as she did in the band or outside of the band, which hasn't gone that far outside of the band. But within the band, she wouldn't have been as popular as she was had she been a god awful singer. But she isn't, so it's fine. But yeah, I think as a three piece, their vocals worked better together, and I think it allowed all three of them to really showcase themselves and shine a little bit more evenly. And I think there was a more calming presence kind of over the band as a whole when they were a three piece.
I think their album Between Us was it felt so intimate and so up close, which
Hmm.
you don't quite get from any of the other albums. And I think that is because it's just the three of them. And the story feels cohesive because there are some songs I like on the other albums. There are a lot of songs I like on the other albums before that. But there are times where there'd be the occasional song where you'd be like, oh, that doesn't feel like it fits the overall story. And you could sort of tell who had taken a bit more of the lead with what songs.
I was a big Little Mix fan when they were a band, up until they broke up, really. They were one of my bucket list artists. They were someone I always wanted to go and see live, and
Yeah.
unfortunately never got the opportunity. And I'm not sure I ever will, but that is the way the cookie crumbles. It is what it is. Um, but yeah, girl bands in general, I feel like just because of the way women in the music industry are treated so differently than men, I feel like if a girl group faces any trials and tribulations, it does kind of just cause a breakup rather than a offshoot of a solo project whilst taking a break, or I'm taking a step back, or whatever it is. I just feel like with the way women are treated and overly sexualized, and there's so much more pressure put on them to look a certain way and be a certain way and sound a certain way and do a certain thing, that when a girl band, is faced with that, I think it just kind of naturally deteriorates rather than spreads its wings.
Yeah. And I think that's also potentially why we have a lot less girl bands. Um,
Hmm.
there's only one I can think of currently that's on my radar as like a new girl band. And I don't know if you've ever seen the Netflix show Building a Band, but the winners of that are Frequency. They seem to be doing really good now that they've won the show and they've gone on to make a bit of music. They I honestly don't even think they have a category of music. They have their own sound, their own genre, influenced by girl bands before them for sure. But they're very much doing their own thing. And again, they were made on a TV show, but the difference is with building a band, you know you're going to be in a band. It's kind of in the name.
Hmm.
And they did still get to choose each other, which I think is also really interesting because when I started watching the show, I've oftentimes felt like bands that were put together on TV didn't always want to be in a band, but because they get to choose themselves, it was very different. Um, yeah, but that's probably the only band I can think of in the last few years, girl band, I mean, in the last few years, that's really, and okay, they haven't been together for that many years. In fact, probably only one and a half, depending on how long in advance the show was filmed before it came out. Um, but I do think the fact that we see far less girl bands versus boy bands is because of that pressure. Um, now there is comparison between members in the boy bands from the media, but not to the same invasive extent of girl bands.
Hmm.
Um, if I was to look at some of my favorite artists over, my 21 years of life, my favorite male artists are always asked about the music, their next project, this, that, and the other. The girls are always asked who they're wearing, who they're dating, you know, it's it's never about the art
I
for them.
do, I do think as well with the big difference as well that I've seen is that boy bands as individual members will be labeled like the mysterious one, the the quiet one, the boisterous one, and then you get the girl bands and it's the fat one, the ugly one. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like why is that like there's just such a difference and distinction on how we describe the differences in these things. So I'm not surprised to not see a massive amount of girl bands. I'm sure there are plenty out there, and obviously, should this reach an audience, there's going to be people commenting, being like, this girl band, this way. I hear you. I hear you. I'm just thinking of like, if you look into the mainstream, the music industry is so heavily saturated with male artists and whiteness that you're very rarely, even if you look at women individually, you've got a handful of massive names and then you've got two handfuls of massive male names. So like it's just like a always going to be an unfair comparison, always going to be an unfair level of conversation to have. But I think when you go from the mysterious one, the quiet one, the confident one, the cocky one to the fat one, the ugly one, it's just like what are we doing? Why is she not also the mysterious one? Why is she not also? But also, I don't think the public would go as far as to label a woman as confident. I think they would purposefully choose a word like bossy.
Mm,
I feel like there's like even a difference in language with even if you're saying the same thing, you're using different words to kind of clarify the intent. Like if I was to call a man confident, yay, fantastic. Or I could call him cocky and then it's not so fantastic. I could call a woman confident and that's yay, fantastic. Or I could call a woman bossy and that's not so fantastic. But you know that it would be confident for a guy and bossy for a girl because that's just
exactly.
how it's just how it is. Oh,
Yeah. It's it's really frustrating as well because it's like, why did we make that the standard?
don't know.
It's I know we haven't. It's just such a shame when the conversation is no longer about the music
Mhm.
because or even just like the stage presence. It's really interesting how a man can literally twerk on stage and he's just having a bit of fun, but a woman dances in a non-sexual way and she's showing off her body. She's trying to seduce the men in the audience. And it's like, okay, but that guy was literally twerking. And she's just like moving in a normal way. And it's also really interesting the people marketing these bands. You know that you don't have to do that.
Mhm.
You don't have to Photoshop things bigger or smaller on album covers. You don't have to write certain captions that actually promotes fans to, well, not fans, but promotes dialogue around comparisons and stuff. That I think we live in a day and age where everyone who does work in music marketing knows what works and doesn't. They know what the fans want, and the fact that that still exists is really shocking to me because the true fans are more likely to value promotion around bands that doesn't come at the expense of one of the other members. And also when promoting solo albums from band members, it's really interesting who leans into, especially if they're like on the verge of a breakup or if they have broken up. It's really interesting to see um what teams are like, okay, we have to get more streams than this other ex-member of a band I was in, and then bands who have stayed together who are like, now that you've streamed my solo music, go and listen to this person. I mean, for example, um, what was really fun is for every Five Sauce solo album, the other boys were showing up to the shows. Like um, Michael had his Five Sauce up. Redo. Michael had his side quiz show, and every member of Five Sauce showed up. Luke had literally just been wherever in the world he was, got on a plane, and still made it to the show. If that isn't
Mhm.
brotherhood, I
I
don't know
think
what is.
I think Luke had literally done like a Red Room secret performance thing in Australia like the day before.
Yeah.
And then back to LA, showed up for his best mate. Like, yeah. It's just I even think with around like headlines and language and whatnot as well, going round background to why I think I see more boy bands than I do girl bands as well is, for example, Callum Hood recently has been wearing a lot of skirts on stage. Fantastic. He's been wearing a lot of skirts on stage, and that is fantastic. But the way the fans are like talking about it, like it's this like fantastic, beautiful thing, which it is. I can't help but every now and again see the conversation and think, but when people like Sabrina Carpenter or Olivia Rodrigo wear a little skimpy skirt as well, which is more common for women to wear than it is a man to wear, by the way. The conversation around that is that they're words that I cannot say, but it's a very negative, mean conversation around what they wear versus a guy wearing the same thing. And it's like, I'm not sure I like that.
One thing I saw recently as well that really upset me. Luke Hemmings wears glittery makeup, and he's brave, and he's artistic, and he's creative, and it's so wonderful.
Mhm.
Then there was a woman who wore a very similar look, and she's doing too much, she's wearing too much. Why are you wearing that much makeup? What ugly thing are you trying to hide? And I'm just
It's
like,
insane,
it's the
absolutely insane.
same look. It's the same look. Harry
Yeah.
Styles
So,
wears a certain dress, and he's creative and he's brave and it's
mhm.
wonderful and he's a great performer. Someone else wears the same look and she's doing too much. Who does she think she is? And again, it's the same look. So why
Mhm.
why is that? And how do we
Yeah, it
stop it?
really, and that all plays a part into this is why I don't think I see as many girl bands around because you do have that constant scrutiny on individual, like solo women artists, let alone when you put them in a girl band and there's four of them getting that individual scrutiny in a big group. It doesn't surprise me that girl bands don't last as long or break up more frequently or have more issues with headlines and whatnot because there is just so much negativity around it that I'm not surprised there isn't as much space and as much grace allowed in the industry for girl band members to go off and do their solo projects.
Yeah. And that's why I think when I see headlines from certain um competitors of our magazine, I think if we're going to make headlines like it's time we have another girl band, yes, it might be time we have another girl band, another big girl band, but first it is time we create a safe space for them to exist. Because there are so many times where we're like, we want the next pop girl, we want the next this, we want the next that, but we still haven't changed the narrative to create a safe place for them to exist. We
Mm-hmm.
have so much work to do. There are so many minority groups of artists, not just girl bands, women in general, people of color, queer artists, that just are not protected. Small town artists
Mm-hmm.
who don't get chances as well. And so, a big part of what needs to happen in order to get another girl band is we need to stop trying to force them, trying to pit them against each other, trying to force them into a box that is a male-dominated industry. And you know what? It's time the industry is no longer male-dominated. We need to even the playing field. As we wrap up this episode, we have a challenge for you guys. Mention your favorite girl band in the comments. Bonus points if you mention more than one, because clearly we need to update our playlist. So if you mention a girl band that we haven't heard of, you might just be one of the next features when it's fan week.
On that, at the very least, female led. I can deal with a background boy drummer, but I want to see women front and center.
In the comments, I'm expecting your favorite girl band that we didn't mention and your favorite local band so that we can support local as well. Support women, support local. Yeah.
Also, if anyone wants anything to listen to, Paris are a fantastic band. PVRIS. I'm sure so many of you have already heard of them, but they're a rock band. So if you're not into rock music, listen to Paris. They are female led and she's a lesbian. So it ticks a lot of boxes and they are fantastic. They are brilliant live and their music is fantastic. I really, 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 really love them. And they've been together forever. The band has been together forever.
So that's been this week's episode of The Professional Fan. We'll see you next week.